You are listening to I Am Interchange.
I am Interchange.
I am Interchange.
I am Interchange.
Fostering curiosity, education, and empathy by exploring the controversial and the provocative.
I am Interchange.
Little did Yarrow Kraner know, as he submitted to yet another ass-kicking in a series thereof, that those same bullies would ignite a distant passion for social justice, for the power of voice, and for the change felt round the world. Meager beginnings with his superhero mother fostered a tenacious, insightful boy that found the meaning of empathy in the fight for self. In 2003, after a string of entrepreneurial and directorial successes, Kraner launched Hatch, a network of influencers accelerating progress on solutions for global challenges. Through its many iterations, Hatch has been an ever-evolving conduit for creativity, social activism, volunteerism, innovation, and that global change Kraner had envisioned for decades earlier. I'm Tate Chamberlin, and in this podcast, my guest Yarrow Kraner and I discuss the pandemic's implications and possibilities for industry, the environment, and the minds finding hope in the spaces between what was, what is, and what might become.
Well, first off, Tate, it's really good to see you.
It's really good to see you too.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
How's your pandemic going?
Pandemic, wow. I remember very vividly, we had a Hatch summit planned in April in Mexico. So like February, March, I was keeping really kind of close finger on the pulse of what was happening out in the world. And it hadn't really fully hit, consciousness.
I was hoping to go to that one.
Yeah, I know. But I do remember this first week of March, a couple things that I had read, it was happening Italy and I was like, oh shit. This is going to get really serious. And I had that moment of panic of what are we going to do? We had such a strategic plan built out for this year. And all of our revenue streams are just going to be eviscerated. And then I'm like, wait a minute, if I'm feeling like this, everyone's feeling like this. We got to, screw how I'm feeling, lead with service and community. And so it's been a really busy year for us, inventing a bunch of new programs and so forth. But I miss seeing people interacting.
Yeah, I miss that too. What are you missing out on most?
There's what I'm missing out on most, and there's also the kind of the future casting of watching how people's behaviors are changing so drastically to be so protective of themselves, their children, their lives, but it's very antisocial. And what I'm missing most is I'm hoping what used to be can return again in just the casual walking down the street and saying hello and going to a grocery store and nodding to people. And some of that stuff has just been stripped away. I was hiking on a mountain trail in Montana and you could see people grab their kids and yank them off the trail as you come by and
hold their breath as you walk by.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, what are these kids going to be thinking 10, 15 years from now? So I miss just that kind of normal interactivity,
Coming from the events world is kind of strange also.
For us, I was just having a conversation on the way here with one of my teammates at Hatch, and had COVID not happened, there's so many things that we would not have done that have now led to big opportunities for Hatch. And one of those is just kind of re-engaging our community as a whole through the global living rooms and the impact labs. And that stuff was like a spin-up of response to COVID, and now we'll never not do them. They're part of our ethos forever, So
it kind of forced you into just accepting what is.
Recognizing the opportunity. The first time we did a global living room in that first week of March, I was looking across several screens of faces of people that I hadn't seen for years, from Hatch Europe, Hatch Mexico, Hatch Latin America, Hatch Montana, 2012, 14, 16, 20, and my heart was melting. And everyone, we were all just whoa, we're part of a big family that we didn't even know it was this family even existed. And so COVID has invited a whole series of reimaginings that nobody could have guessed that every single industry could grind to a halt in every single country in the course of 10 days. It just wasn't possible. Yeah. And now that we know that that's possible, everything's on the table about what's possible.
Are you reading anything right now?
Mostly my laptop.
You're reading your laptop, like emails and stuff? Any articles?
Emails, articles. I do a ton of research every day. I'm into a lot of systems change, systems thinking. Like, how do we take advantage of this window in time that's inviting us to reimagine what's possible? Like, how can we kind of crowbar that window open a little bit longer to bring solutions to light? If it closes too quickly, humans have short memories. So
so you're diving in fully to this opportunity.
Yeah, reimagining these systems that have been entrenched for hundreds of years. COVID's just peeled back this top layer that's revealed all of these really brutal flaws in how we've built our structural systems on, systemic oppression and racism and the capitalism and this kind of zero-sum game. So you start looking at so many of these different verticals and domains that can be rethought through in this window where let's not get back to normal. Because that was broken. Let's fix what was broken once, now that we have this opportunity.
Is there an article that's been especially inspiring for you?
I wouldn't say it's an article. It's the people I talk to, and it's a lot of the people that I reach out to on a continual basis that advise me and others. Like John Hagel, actually just retired, but he's like a longtime Silicon Valley mentor and ran Deloitte's Center for the Edge. Was the founder of that. I called him in like March or April. I was like, John, are all these clients, are they calling you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what are they asking? How to get back to normal? Like, what do you say? Not to get back to normal. I'm like, thank you.
Nice. That's great. Before we're going to dive into all of that, I want to just kind of reach back into your history box. Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I'll tell you just a quick little snippet. My mom walked out of an abusive relationship. My dad had some mental health issues and was diagnosed schizophrenic later on. All that stuff kind of came to light. But she left the house with 25 cents in her pocket, so she was going to the grocery store. And me under one arm and this 25 cents in her pocket that she used at the corner phone booth to call the only person she knew in that particular town, which was Denver, which we had just moved to. And, anyway, ended up working like 4 jobs simultaneously for the next few years to put herself through her family's first college degree. From that was Minneapolis. And then we came to Bozeman when I was in 2nd grade, and she put herself through her master's degree. And in the government subsidized housing that we were in, they were pretty run down. Like, we kind of got bumped around to a few of them because they would get condemned and bulldozed. But I remember sitting on the steps of one of these apartment kind of duplex complexes, and that's when this person came next door to take our picture. My mom and I were just kind of sitting on the steps, and he's like, "Do you mind if I'm like, yeah, sure." But he later brought that photograph over. But I remember like that moment where I was like staring at that camera. What does that do? How does it work? He's pointing this thing at us. Like, what happens next? From that point forward, like, I just became, once my mom kind of saw that interest in me and got me a camera, which was like a big lift at that point in our lives. I just remember receiving that gift and I was like, whoa. I went to school in Irving, which is like the small school in Bozeman, Montana. And I would walk to school and document my path to school every day. Like, I'd take pictures of the crosswalking guards and this particular lavender bush. And what it did is it helped me kind of evolve my lens and how I would see the world around me. And still to this day, like when I travel, like I'll go down the street with a friend and we're just kind of chatting and I'm just like randomly clicking things. And then later we'll go through a kind of a slideshow of images and they're like, wait, where was that? Where was that? Where was that? Like, that camera at a young age helped me see things that other people don't necessarily pay attention to. Like looking up, looking down, looking at, just like zooming in, zooming out. And my childhood was full of that sort of stuff.
I'm trying to recollect a time other than today where I didn't see you with a camera. The picture you're talking about, you kind of laying on your mom's lap.
Yeah.
And that's the photo that really made you love photography, because you kind of had that curiosity of, what's this guy pointing at me?
Yeah. Well, that's the one that sparked the curiosity. Once I got the camera, that's where I fell in love with what I could do. And, like, holy crap, I could take a photograph and then save up enough money to go get this thing dropped off at this building that when I come back, they give me prints that I can then see what was in that camera, it all felt like magic.
Yeah, I wasn't quite that young. I went through a great photography phase in high school that I just love. And I've rekindled that love recently, and it's been awesome.
I believe that the camera enhances your empathy, and just seeing things through a lens, and you start to just see things a little bit differently. And of course, empathy is seeing things through someone else's, like to have lived that experience and to feel that experience. The thought exercise of like, what are they feeling and why are they feeling that, to kind of like go down the kind of a list of layers. But I think that for me, at least, the camera really opened that up to start to question kind of what's below the surface of what you're seeing. That's
great. I like that. I appreciate the kind of framework and the lens that you can kind of gain empathy through. What did your mom do at that time for work-wise?
Well, she was cleaning houses, cleaning toilets. On a good year, there was one year specifically I remember that she would kind of nanny and house sit, and that meant that we got to go stay in nice homes for a little while. I remember the first time I walked in one of those houses, I was like, is this someone's house? Like, people live like this? This is a whole different, like, you know, what's possible, you know? How does one get to be one of these people living in one of these places? Like, look at these toys. And like, you know, this is like a kind of a mind expander.
Just the difference in class.
Yeah, the difference in class and my childhood, even though it was like the homes we were in were being bulldozed and condemned, and there was one year we lived in 4 or 5 different homes, and one family, really nice family, like donated their cabin to us, and that cabin was up in Bear Canyon. We had to hike up this hill to go to this cabin that had 0 electricity, running water, and plastic sheets for the windows, and it was winter, and it was really, really cold. So we'd like carry the water up this hill, but through all of that, I just remember like I never really felt like sorry for myself or like this was bad way to live or anything. Like it always just felt like an adventure. Then when I would start to kind of get exposed to these other worlds, it's an interesting conundrum. You're like, huh? You start comparing.
I like that a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, geez, these people it feels so comfortable in here. Like what?
Running
like,
warm water. You had never experienced it, so you didn't know the difference.
Yeah, right. It's the baseline of what you have as your experience. You know, I was on a conversation earlier today with a couple of friends. We're building a workshop out, and one of those is really kind of unpacking the lenses that we grow through our experiences, through culture and unconscious bias and your backgrounds and the norms, and they just stack up. What you're looking through, almost like a contact lens, just gets like thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. It's a prism. It starts refracting what's reality, and you now have this POV, this point of view, this perspective that is not accurate because it's accurate to you, but then you and I could be looking at the same thing and seeing it 1,000 different ways.
Yeah, it's like social science is so hard to pinpoint because all of the points of gathering data have the layers that you're talking about. I guess it reminds me in integral facilitation, one of my favorite pieces was shadow, and it's the side of us that we choose not to acknowledge or don't know exists.
Yeah, or both.
Yeah.
They're like, once you know it exists, you're like, go away.
Yeah. Sweep it back under the carpet, please. Your mom got a job on the Indian reservation.
Yeah, she graduated grad school. I remember her coming home was like, hey, I'm applying for these jobs, and like, wow, like real jobs. Like we can go do this now. Like we're gonna level up. And there was one teaching job in 2 which seemed, and this is no kidding, right? Like
I've been to 2
Have you? Like, I've still not been to 2 but I remember like thinking to myself, like 2 that sounds cool. And, like open up a map and looking at it, and it was like population, I don't know, 400, yeah. 300, whatever. I was like, And then the other one was Rocky Boy Indian Reservation, and nothing crossed my mind that would be different to go to Rocky Boy, right? I was just like, oh, great. Well, like, whatever it is, it's better than where we are now because I had a new baseline to consider of, you know, now we are in this trajectory toward improving our lives.
Because your mom had a real job now.
A real job, yeah. She graduated, and I was excited, and we're like, you know, off we went. And
to Rocky Boy. What tribe is in Rocky Boy?
Chippewa Cree. And it's up by Havre, Montana. If you're not really that familiar with Montana, it's fairly close to the High Line and kind of close to Canada. The Rocky Mountain front, the Rocky Mountain Plains, it's super flat. It's windy. there's a serenity to it, but it's also a really kind of sad and broken place. When I was there, I haven't been back for a long time, but I just mean like the very first day we got there with the moving van, and they had paid for a van to bring our stuff up, and I was helping unload the stuff. I couldn't wait to get that last box off the truck, and I was running it into the house, and it's like, boom, last one done. Like, because there's these 3 kids that were playing basketball down in the court below where this kind of row of teacher housing was. So got the last box in, ran down these like super long stairs across the street onto this basketball court. I'm like, hey, and the basketball is like bonk, bonk, bonk. And there's this pause, and I'm like just so excited to be in a new place with new people, with potentially new friends. And one guy walked over to me, kind of stopped, looked at me, bounced the basketball one more time, bonk, and then punched me in the face. And my nose exploded, like blood came out everywhere. I was just like, I'd never been hit before. And I was like really confused. Like, what did I say? It took me a couple seconds to process, like they don't want me there. Turned around and went back up the stairs. And that was kind of the beginning of a pretty tumultuous, 2 years of my life. Like I lived there for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. I moved there playing cello, and I left, lifting weights with a chip on my shoulder.
You were kind of the only white kid on the reservation at that time?
No, I was the only white kid in the school. They called me Little Custard, which even at that time was kind of like, didn't fully unpack all the nuance there.
He's kind of romanticized in Western culture still.
Yeah, I mean, lots of things.
Lots of things
in American history are still romanticized about systemic racism and all the shitty things that happened for us to even land in this country.
I think of things like Little House on the Prairie, where settling just seems so innocent.
Yeah, and before the settling could happen, they had to kind of go, quote unquote, cleanse all the people that were already living there, take control of that land. It was like, I was the entertainment almost to a degree for 2 years for a lot of those kids where, the school bell would ring at 3 o'clock and like, and everyone would get up and bolt out of the classroom, and I would sit there and wait for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And then the teacher, who would always be doing kind of like some kind of end of day stuff, would finally like close his notebook and be like, hey, we gotta go. I'm like, yeah. And I would, cue the James Bond music. It was like bump, 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 bump. It's like if I could get from that school to, across the schoolyard, across that basketball court, across that street, up these really long stairs before anybody caught me, like that was a victory that day. Otherwise, I would just get tackled and held down, and everyone could take their turn kicking my ass. I got better at different things. I was finding different routes out the back way that could go up through this other trail, and I started like getting partially from survival, but also I just, I didn't want to get my ass kicked. It became almost like a tactical chess thing at that point. And I remember running into those kids 3 years later in a basketball game, in a high school basketball tournament that a bunch of Class A, Class C, Class B schools had come to. And at this point I was wrestling, and just, I'd been lifting weights, and I had kind of a chip on my shoulder. And I came around the corner, and there was this group of these kids that used to bully me, and they're all standing there. And there was this moment I was like, man, I was like licking my chops for a second. I was like, wow, now I can completely.
You bulked up quite a bit.
Yeah, I'd like kept growing, and they'd stopped growing. There was this moment like, whoop, I'm in charge now. And I started walking toward them, and I just remember this kind of visceral, kind of like this flash of images of hundreds of years of hatred of like, the why. Like, why do they feel like this? It was a moment. It was my first kind of exercise that, viscerally to my memory of empathy. I looked back at that moment and just was like, suddenly I was like, whoa, like I've been given a real gift as a white male traditionally doesn't ever experience anything like that before. Like if you grow up black, you're black your whole life. People are profiling you and making snap judgments across the street from you. And in my case, I left the reservation and wasn't in that dynamic anymore. And yet it just kind of set a tone, I think, for me for the rest of my life of like really wanting to kind of keep open arms to everyone that I possibly could and kind of reset my values on acceptance and being more attracted to the fringe dwellers than those people that are on the edge of the room that are kind of raising a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, so you approached him at this basketball game, much bigger, and when you just thought about licking your chops and fighting back, it just dawned on you this thought to consider why there's this deep hatred.
Yeah.
Maybe not for you specifically, but for your culture, for our culture.
Yeah, where does that come from? Asking yourself the question of why, like someone might feel like this, is that first step of I could feel the rage kind of building up in myself. And as I stepped toward them, there was the visceral flash of like all these images of like hate and murder. It's like, it was a moment of realization where you recognize that you can be an additional link in that chain or remove yourself from that part of the chain. Like, I'm not going to be a conduit to continue that forward.
Why did you want retribution or to reconcile with them? Or did you?
The retribution part was like, I've been held down and kicked in my head and back and punched and so forth for like a couple years now. And 2 years later, like, that's not going to happen, because in 8th grade, I just started like working out and doing push-ups, and my mom taught art. I was like, I'm rebelling against the art world. I'm going to be muscular and an athlete, and I'm, I'm just going to be able to take care of myself, basically, was really what it kind of boiled down to. And, retribution was just like, I'm capable of reversing the tables, and now I can seize that opportunity, but maybe it's not an opportunity to be seized, basically. It was an opportunity to learn something.
As a white person who was poor and fought for everything on the way up, where do you see your place in the world amongst the Black Lives Matter movement and indigenous history?
That's an evolving question, rapidly evolving. I mean, I feel like I've been, in my mind, an ally since that age of 8th grade. That being said, like this year, 2020, in the era of COVID, George Floyd's murder was like a real pivotal moment for a lot of people, and it was for me. I just remember seeing a post from a friend of mine, Reggie Tidwell, in Asheville, North Carolina, who's black, and he's like, I'm just afraid to raise my son in a world where he could be shot and killed before he's ever asked a question. And just the way that he framed that, there's probably a lot of kind of layers to why it hit me right then. Like, we're all still stripped so bare right now during COVID to begin with, and stretched thin, and like this weight on us. But that was like a straw that kind of broke everyone. And it definitely did me. I just started doing a ton of research on, like, what does the police brutality look like in other countries, and what's the ratio of, African Americans being pulled over versus shot at? Like what are all the data points? Like, I was starting to kind of lean into wanting to understand the data, where these mental models are being projected from and how they're being empowered. And to answer your question, like it's a rapidly evolving understanding of my place, and I don't even exactly know what that is yet. I just do know that we're looking at a lot of opportunities, every opportunity we can, to use platforms that we've been a part of building, and offering those platforms out, and trying to get people of color and founders of color and women of color, like, on the microphone, on boards, in speaking opportunities. Like, climate change and education, those things have always kind of been ever present for me. Equity and racial justice none of it works without all of them working. And so it's been very much accelerated this year for me.
Yeah, I see. You could probably call them refugees at this point, of the flood of people moving inland. You can definitely tell the income inequality, because the wealthy people are the only ones who can afford to leave.
Yeah. I have this very specific visual in my mind. It's almost like the top layer of your skin. Like, just when you peel that back, and like, oh, I have nice complexion. But when you peel it back and you start seeing all the shit underneath it that's working and not working, COVID has really put a magnifying glass on the gap of wealth, the gap of privilege, the gap of, most people aren't don't have the luxury to leave the situation that they're in. They're in shared housing, it's tight containment, their healthcare is not as good. I mean, Montana has had a record year of real estate. People are moving here from San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, like urban areas. I'm not exactly sure where it goes from here, but like urban probably won't be the same. Like most people that were using Montana as the place that they would kind of go to twice a year, second homes, this is where they feel safe, and they're reconnecting to nature, and they're realigning a new relationship with nature. And yeah, that's directly tied to the privilege you might have to be able to go do that, because not everyone has that opportunity to go reconnect with nature. And I grew up small town Montana, went to Los Angeles for 9 years, came back, started Hatch almost 18 years ago, considered moving back to a city a few years ago under the auspices of like, am I being selfish by being tucked away up here in the mountains? Should I be in a place that has a higher collision rate of serendipitous meetings of people that together we can go make impact? Yeah, I was like making the move to accelerate our work with Hatch by moving back into the city. And I'm just really grateful that didn't happen.
Yeah, because I mean, most things are digital now anyway, and you have that connection. And I think with your Hatch summits, inviting people to a place like Montana is really valuable to them. When you created Hatch, you reference real life superheroes. What is a real life superhero?
Well, you are one, Tate.
Me?
Yeah, you're a real life superhero. Since I've met you, which was, might have been like 6 years ago, you are always on the front lines of advocacy and harnessing media and the arts and creativity to tell stories, and not just for self-serving, but to beautify parts of Bozeman. And like, from the moment I met you, I was like, oh, that guy's a super dude. He's a Hatcher. And these are kind of internal dialogues I have with myself when I meet someone. But, the short answer to your question is, at first, what I thought was real life superhero were, I was inspired by this conversation. I thought I was moving to the epicenter of creative genius in Los Angeles. I'd be inspired every day. A couple of years in, I'm like, where are they? I meet this Czechoslovakian composer that's teaching deaf kids how to read and play music. And like, I was like awestruck with like how it worked. Like, what are the physics and the mechanics? Like, tell me more about how, I want to know everything. And the next day I met this scientist that was on this team to piece the ozone layer back together. I'm like, you're like a real life superhero. Is it working? You're like saving the world. That's kind of where that criteria matrix started. And it was a way to help reframe not just athletes and entertainers, the people that we know as household names and famous people, but scientists and teachers and people on the front lines of social impact. But where the real meat of it is like, we're all born super. Everyone is a real life superhero. Like, the opportunity, the invitation is to go seek that out, to ask yourself some questions and to find what it is within you that's like kind of that Venn diagram of what makes you special, that's kind of unique, that you don't really notice in a lot of other people. What makes you smile? Like, what are you doing? What makes you the happiest when you're doing that? And what the world needs most. And like, there's a Venn diagram in there, right? The Japanese have something kind of similar called
the Ikigai.
Yes, the Ikigai.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Ikigai, yeah. It's the reason for being. Like, it's kind of your purpose, your existence, you're living. And, with that, you can tap into your real life superpowers. And once you define that, like, all the molecules in your body conspire to manifest that best self. And they're already kind of going to work without even and you just kind of just follow along to a certain degree.
Well, thank you for calling me a real life superhero. That's awesome. I've had great time and a lot of great influences through you and the Hatch Network. So it's definitely served a great purpose in my life. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for activating on your human potential.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I would go insane, I think, if I didn't do Blunderbuss or Interchange.
Oh, there's no question. You are a creator. You are a manifester. You're an engine of creativity. And like, that sparks Pat running tech and Bryant, who just left, and this whole ecosystem that I just walked out of in Blunderbuss. Like, they all have opportunities because of this vision that you have of like, let's create this modern version of a co-working, co-living, and you're manifesting it. So,
other than me, who are your biggest superheroes?
There's so many. My mom is definitely the original. She's an exceptional human being. And the people, that I'm spending my time with, like right now, I had this realization a couple of years ago at Hatch. The summit ended and we all came together in this like massive group hug, and it felt so good. And then it felt even better. And then it felt so good, like I had tears coming down my face. And I was like, whoa, what is that? What is that? What is that emotion? Like looked up, I was like, wow, I built a family. Because I grew up without a family. And it was just like my first kind of realization. So that family, I mean, I don't take any of it for granted that I get to pick up the phone and have the most beautiful conversations with the most incredible minds that are intelligent and heartfelt, and just think teach me every conversation that I have. Like I keep evolving because of the people that we've curated and brought together and cultivated, and it's been remarkable.
I've seen Hatch grow and pivot through different iterations. How do you define Hatch today?
It's so funny when we asked that question. I just did a Rolodex of all the different ways I've described it over the last 17 years. Hatch is a global network of people, thought leaders in every domain you can imagine. It's a cross-pollination of diverse industries, ages, ethnicities, generations. So, the premise is if you're able to, if you take a bunch of area experts to scan a problem, they're going to get a 2D output of that problem. If you put a bunch of diverse mindsets, perspectives around a challenge and scan that problem, so to speak, you'll get this three-dimensional holographic output of that problem, daylighting blind spots, assumptions, opportunities for innovation and improvement, and people that are asking what if because they're not in that industry and they're not laden with those rules. And the more times you can ask what if, the closer you are to hitting a breakthrough. That's actually not exactly how I explain Hatch these days, but that's the riff that is currently we're bringing people together to accelerate solutions for each other and for the greater world. So we find people that are on the front lines of these various industries, and the UN has 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals: poverty, education, gender equity, race equity, to find people that are on the front lines of fighting for justice in these different zones, the environment, education, and so forth. Bringing those people together, they're already attuned to a certain frequency. When you bring that group together, there is a exponential factor that happens. It's 1 + 1 = 11. Human potential is exponential, and those frequencies start to harmonize. And it sounds a little woo-woo and ethereal, but I'm so present and witness to watching it happen. Okay, we got 15 countries here and multiple states and people from different industries, and everyone's just getting off a plane, and most of them are wondering why am I here? What was this thing that I got invited to? Who talked me into this? And then you can see that arc over 3.5 days where this becomes a very coalesced, intentional group. It's focusable, and then you start to stretch that out over multiple cohorts over years. This would have been the fall of our 25th summit, and we're going to do something virtual to kind of celebrate an all-star reunion. But we were putting a lot of time and energy and thought into that benchmark. But Hatch is really about solving challenges with each other, for each other. It's a mycelial network. It's very reciprocal. You put 9 people in a circle, and everyone has an ask, and 100% of the time, someone has a solution for that. So when you start to see those masterminds at play, if you're accelerating, 100 people that can go impact the lives of 100 million, that exponential, the human potential is exponential. That math starts to get really exciting and kind of powerful. So we started building tools around how to track that as well. So Hatch is a little bit hard to explain.
You talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and all these people, superheroes who are problem solving these 17 goals and all of the different iterations of the different problems of each goal. And you created Hatch Labs, where you work to find a project or create something new to solve these goals. Will you tell me a little bit about the Hatch Labs?
Yeah, Hatch started as a different model. It was a festival model. It was outward facing. We marketed. We had a full page ad in the Variety magazine in Hollywood. It almost felt like a responsibility. We'd brought together and found and done the research to curate some really interesting, beautiful humans. Now, when someone says, "Hey, I have a problem," I'm like, "Tell me about your problem. Like, what's your problem?" And in the back of my mind, it's almost like a visual, like this, these like encyclopedias just spread out behind me of like, which book can I pull off the shelf to help this problem? And in that kind of thought exercise was like, wow, we could go into our library and like pull off, a Worley and a San Rahi and a Liz Dozier and an Erica Mackey. And like, let's build a team of people that are really used to fluidity, uncertainty, solving problems. I don't care what industry you're in, this is the A team. And then there was this kind of thought that like once we're on the inside of some of these larger machines that we have an opportunity to help at least share a narrative that they have significant finger on a lever. So the labs began as a way to recognize that we had aggregated all of these resources. Now we could kind of pull them together at certain times and point them at something to accelerate a solution. And, when COVID hit this year, we had several labs lined up that we were really excited about. And, one of them was kind of a continuation from something that started last year. We had a partnership with Soul Buffalo and Dave Ford, who had this amazing vision to put together a bunch of executives from some of the largest creators of plastics in the world, Dow Chemical and SAP not being one of the largest creators of plastic, like Nestle, Coca-Cola, with some historically kind of adversarial relationships, Greenpeace, World Wildlife Federation, there's like a long list, but like onto the ship to do these lab sprints, and kind of trapped together for 3.5 days. No one's getting off the boat. We would take them out to this like the plastic gyre, and Dave and Soul Buffalo, they have this amazing vision for these immersive solutions. And we came in for some of the softer programming, the curation and the wildcard thinkers and the labs, and watching the labs take shape over the course of 3.5 days. There's 4 of those projects that are currently significant impactors and funded. And there's, we published a 120-page output report on that. So this year we were about to do those labs again. We had a series of them, and we kind of pivoted into started the Impact Labs, which is a virtual experiment. Like we had no idea if this was going to work. It was a complete experiment. So we had 150 people sign up, 12 countries, 34 states across the US on 4 topic areas: education, environment, equity, racial justice, and mobilize the vote. And from those 150 that ended up like kind of whittling down to about 135, made 20 teams on those 4 topic areas. And then we launched 20 of those projects to a group of implementation and funding partners. And then they got first look at those opportunities to see these brilliant ideas. And we had 14-year-olds and 84-year-olds in the same group. It was expanding their worldviews. There's so many kind of byproducts of the experience that aren't just the product itself. It's the process of that experience that we're really excited to go share with, a lot of companies kind of going forward now that we've prototyped and proven that model out.
You talked about at the beginning of this pandemic, it's causing all these layers to be peeled back, and it's offering this kind of reflective time and maybe potential to reimagine. So I want to get into that, but what is keeping you up at night?
Oh, geez, that's a whole different spin you just put on that one. You surprised me. I have this kind of throttle of kind of an empathy funnel almost. Like I minimize how many times I open up the news. Some would say you should be really well informed. Like, if I inform myself every single day, I'd be a wreck. Like I couldn't even be productive. Like I need to distance myself, because it's also like this. There's like this up and down, zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. If you like zoom out, it starts to look like a flat line depending on your perspective. So like what happens on a day-to-day basis, granted, I want to have finger on the pulse, yet I don't want to debilitize myself to the point where I can't do anything. So what keeps me up at night a lot of times, and this sounds strange, but like pain in the world and how to be of service to it. And if I don't sleep, which does happen, I'll catch myself, 5 or 6 days in of like bad sleep. being completely unproductive and not being able to be of service. So I have to start like kind of reprioritizing, like, well, how can I be of best service? One is to sleep. So
Kind of self as instrument. You can't do the work that you love if your body's not functioning and keeping you healthy and able to.
yeah, I mean, it's oxygen mask on yourself. It's the old airline adage. It's like, if you can't take care of yourself, then you're going to have a short-lived adventure of taking care of other people, but then you'll be gone.
Is our current system immovable?
No, it's not immovable. There's so many kind of metaphors there, but when you start thinking about what's possible, and then when you see what COVID kind of exposed as what's possible, like the world shutting down, like literally shutting down, and India seeing its skies for the first time in 25 years, and like all like the Earth's kind of like response to that, and blossoming and rebounding, and like shutting down every industry in the world. Like, okay, everyone's like, industry timeout, like stop creating, manufacturing, industrializing. That's not possible. Suddenly it is. Like, but wait, it's possible. So these systems that are so foundational, everything's immovable. There's been countless revolutions over the years. There's been thousands and thousands of different regime changes, and all of this happens while the Earth kind of just sits patiently and like lets us carve it out like a cancer. Remember the book The Giving Tree, where all that was left was like him sitting on this stump, and the tree was still like, I still want to give to you. It's like, this is all I need right now. And Earth doesn't really care necessarily. Nature's going to go on, but we as human species, we're going to need to listen to the invitation that we've just been given. And I believe that this is probably the gentlest one that we'll receive. This is the first potentially of a drumbeat of many. And if we don't kind of heed the wisdom that's been offered to us, then every year the fires, the hurricanes, everything is getting more and more dramatic every year. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's necessary to shift some of these systems that are in place.
It's necessary. So how long is our window, would you say, to reimagine?
I'll give you a couple of data points. David McConville, who's a dear friend and a mentor and just a hatcher, someone I admire a lot, was the president of the Buckminster Fuller Institute. And Bucky had this like beautiful understanding of living systems and how everything's connected. And David, the one that really actually sparked me wondering if I was being selfish by being tucked away up here in Montana, because he moved from Asheville, North Carolina to Oakland. And I was like, what? Like, this is a man who loves just being surrounded by nature. And I flew down and had a beer with him. I was like, David, why did you come to Oakland? We have a 8 to 9 year window. I moved here to accelerate my work. I'm like, did you say 80 to 90 year window? And he's like, no. So depending on which kind of like belief system you ask or scientist you ask, like we had Michelle Thaler on one of our global living rooms recently, who's a NASA astronomer. NASA had been working on and compiling this data for years, decades, and they just released it in April. And it was in the New York Times, and of course nobody really gives a shit because COVID's happening. Everyone's trying to figure out what's happening with me in my life. This report kind of like hits the paper and kind of slides off, and nobody really pays attention. But in the global living room that we had with her, she starts to show the data. This data used to say that like 190, 200 years from now, there would be 2 to 4 foot ocean rise. Well, that data, the new data now says that will happen within the lifetime of our children. So before this century is out, in the next 65, 75 years, there will be 2 to 4 foot ocean rise. And let me show you what that looks like on a map. And then when you start to like show that shrinkage of inhabitable, what's currently the inhabited Earth, shrinking by 25%, all the coasts, billions of people like now being pushed into migration, redefining your perception of what's a refugee in our own country, in every island around the world that's going to like disappear under 4 foot ocean rise. And that's already because of the carbon that's been emitted, not that we might still emit.
So instead of just being sustainable and becoming carbon neutral, the regenerative process is a step beyond in regenerating the system and growing it again.
Exactly.
Do you think cities are dying? Or will cities reinvent how they grow their food and they'll survive somehow?
I mean, I think some cities will die. I think that there will always be people for cities. For me, at the age of like 19, 20, 21, nobody was going to tell me I was going to stay in Montana. Like, I was out of here.
No thanks, yeah.
And so I couldn't wait to go to a place like New York or Los Angeles or Paris or whatever. And, that'll continue. Like, I can't remember the exact stats, but 10 or 15 or 20,000 people that move to Los Angeles every day, there's equal or more than move out, right? And when I first moved there, I was making friends with everyone. I wanted to get to know them and like understand their stories and ask lots of questions. And then they wouldn't call back. And like, oh, no, I'm sorry, I moved. And like, oh, and I moved. And I was like, oh, this kind of like a conveyor belt here of people. Like, I can't wait to get here. And then the system kind of like really puts you, like tests your mettle, and like any good ecosystem, like a body is going to like, I don't think this is supposed to belong. I'm going to do everything I can to kind of push it to the, but if you are resilient and aren't going anywhere, like it's like, okay, I'll cut you a break. Cities won't die because there will always be people that are ruling through it. I think what's different now is that places like Montana, we already had kind of one awakening to Montana in 1994, I think it was when River Runs Through It came out. And that film forever changed the trajectory of this state. It romanticized fly fishing. You look back at the numbers of the real estate and tourism industry and just even the industry of fly fishing. Like, there was a massive like inflection point there. And we're having kind of a second round of that right now with a very different kind of context and personality around it. But there's a mass exodus of folks that are leaving cities to rebuild a place that has more space and natural air, smaller community and authenticity. I don't think cities are going to die. I think they're just going to slowly serve a different purpose, become almost kind of like industrial centers.
What does the world look like if we fix all of the problems that are broken at this moment?
Hatch. I mean, I say that a little tongue in cheek, but being present in the moment, being for each other, wanting to be of service, having the luxury and privilege to be able to be of service because you're not fighting for survival. There's a lot of levels of that. Nature works 99% of the time in collaboration and not competition. If we solved all the world's problems, which is going to take some significant retooling in some countries, that might take a couple centuries. Equity, love, people not competing and working together. It's working more like nature.
Are there any practices that you can share that have changed your life to make you more sustainable or regenerative?
I really do consciously practice listening.
Yeah. You've mentioned being present a few times, and one thing that Pete Strom has kind of influenced us both with, along with integral facilitation, is how to be a good listener.
Yeah.
And that is meaningful. It's incredibly effective with problem solving.
Projecting the solutions on something that you don't have understanding of, right? I think they call that like flyby white savior syndrome. Let me land in this new country that I've never been to and bring you all the answers. Well, I think you have some listening to do first to fully understand. And even then it's like, what are you trying to solve, and how can I be of service? They know the answer, whoever you're projecting to try to help accelerate a solution for. Oftentimes they don't really, and now I'm shifting in almost kind of like corporate speak for a second, but in some of the conversations we've had around Hatch Labs, they think they are asking the right question. And so you just keep asking questions to get them to ask you the question, and that question keeps changing and evolving. And then essentially you're like, oh, I understand. Patience, agility, fluidity, problem solving, creativity. I mean, I would definitely say sharpen those specific tools in your tool shed that are empathy, listening, creativity. The rest kind of will lead toward critical problem solving and critical thinking and so forth. Like creativity is one that definitely should not be. People are like, I'm not creative. It's like, you just haven't really found your version of creativity yet. If I had an ask for anyone on this podcast listening right now, go through that thought exercise with someone else. Ask them the question of like, hey, what's your real life superpower? What is a skill that you've wanted to enhance? Like, what keeps you up at night? Like these questions that get people thinking deeper, knock rocks loose toward progress within that individual, and then it becomes an aggregate of a lot of individuals being realized.
I think you and I have struggled with whether I should be a nonprofit or a for-profit. I think that there's a lot of baggage that comes with capitalism. What's your relationship to money and your organizations?
It's usually the last thing on my mind all the time, oftentimes to a fault. Even Hatch, it's like, I made my living as a film director and a marketer for 14 or 15 years of Hatch. So it was a 100% nonprofit, volunteer-driven, not one-paid staff, never took any funds from any of the money that we raised. And, I was like, wow, like, I'm so proud of, like, this is where we pour our passion, but over here is where we make our money. The realization, like, well, the two are a little bit in tug-of-war right now. But I just really want to think about one and not the other. So then I had to put a business lens on Hatch. Like, well, I have to start charging people to come to the summits. How much does it cost to put 150 people up, and how much does it cost to feed them? And then like, well, we got to build a little bit on there for a salary if I'm going to stop paying my mortgage with this other job that I used to have. So I kind of stepped off the cliff and had about a year where there wasn't a cloud that kind of landed under my foot. I went into more debt and just really kept my belief in that, drilling down on what we wanted to do with Hatch. Putting a business lens on it, I oftentimes really wish that I had gone to business school, or that I had a father that had instilled more of these practices in me, and understanding how to be fiscally literate and understanding how to be financially strategic. Man, I wish that I had that foundation. I really do. I don't undermine it, I don't scoff it. I long for that knowledge, really, that background. I've tried to pick up as much as I can along the way, but now I want to build systems that generate revenue, because all I want to do is just be able to self-fund. I don't want to have to be reliant on other systems, banging on doors all the time and asking people, and it feels like such an imposition. It's like creating a sustainable model means putting a very business lens on something. Capitalism is capitalism. Like, it gets kind of lumped in with a bunch of things that are negative, but the core of its original principle was how to create sustainable systems. If its current version of that could meet the original intention again, we'd be in good shape. I mean, there's a graphic out there that shows Jeff Bezos' wealth by pixel in relationship to all of the world needs. Like 5 years of every single person's healthcare being paid for is like 2 pixels on this thing that you have to like scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. The person that put this visual graphic together, you're scrolling for a while. At first it's kind of like dropping these little data points and it's keeping you moving. And then you go for a long time without seeing anything. And just about the time you're like, oh, maybe that was it. Nope, still going. Like, there's a sense of humor there, but there's also a question that really must be asked by those in technology specifically that have the capacity to put an end to a lot of suffering. Like, it's not as simple as like, okay, I'm going to give $20 billion away. Like, where does it go? What's the due diligence? People are greedy. How do you ensure it does what you want it to do? It gets to the right, like, that part is so broken too. But regardless, the wealth exists to solve those problems.
This weekend, we've got this debate called OK Boomer, and there's this guy named Shane. He's Gen Z, and he has basically described his entrance into the world as being born into his house being on fire. With all the insurmountable work ahead of us, what do we have to remain hopeful?
The first thing I think about when you ask me that question, there's a Jane Goodall quote: thousands of years from now, a species very much like ours will look back and wonder how we could let all of these other species just die. And yet there's so much to remain hopeful for. And if we fall into a state of apathy, there's no hope. All is lost. And so the other analogy is like that, the young kid that's walking along the seashore throwing starfish back in the ocean. And the guy's like, hey, it doesn't make any difference. He's like, well, it did to that one. Here we are in this kind of moment before a very historic election. Every vote, every voice, every person, every intention, every wish, every dream counts. And if that were true, it would be a very powerful world. And it can be true. And it is true. But they have to believe that. And if they don't believe that, then it's not true. So it's a self-fulfilling destiny. It's like you will see it when you believe it. Not, I'll believe it when I see it. You will see it when you believe it. I mean, everything's hopeful. I mean, right now, this is like one of the darkest times I can remember. And yet, I feel like it's an opportunity as a reset button.
Yarrow Kraner, the founder of the Hatch Network. Thanks for being here.
Tate, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
While the past year has held its share of surprises and stumbling blocks for Kraner and his work with Hatch, it has also provided through COVID the gentlest invitation to change that humanity is likely to get. What seemed impossible, a comprehensive shutdown of all industry overnight in response to urgent need. It happened, and the world kept turning. India saw clear skies for the first time in 25 years. Wildlife reemerged and flourished. People found a way remotely to keep the gears turning. In this reaction to overwhelming loss is the key to hope. It is all possible. Life can change. Humanity can pivot, nimbly if necessary, and embrace a way that provides salvation for itself and the planet. The pandemic has offered a hard reset, and we've collectively realized how desperately we needed it. For Hatch, global living rooms and impact labs are now a permanent part of its ethos, supporting intergenerational and cultural problem solving, accelerating change, and cultivating hope. As Kraner asserts, we will see it when we believe it. Every vote, every voice, every person, every intention, every wish, every dream counts. And if that were true, it would be a very powerful world. And it can be true. And it is true if we double down. If we lean in harder, if we believe, if we accept the invitation we've been given and invent a brighter tomorrow. A huge thank you to our supporters: Susan Karstensen, Zocalo Coffee House, Whistle Pig Korean, Last Best Comedy, Hatch, Loken Productions, Ben Johnson Photography, Superfluous Industries, and Blunderbuss. A shout out to our media team: Allison Gregory, Pat Loken, Ben Johnson, Jessica Byerly, Shannon Hughes, Nathaniel Johns, Bryant Stersala, and Dylan Weber. Hey, Tate Chamberlin here. Thanks for listening and supporting I Am Interchange. We build our projects to align with the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? Shoot me an email at tate@iaminterchange.org. That's tate@iaminterchange.org. Remember, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.